Good evening to all our audiences in South Asia and our audiences who are joining us from different time zones. Hope you are enjoying the session so far. And now welcome to session 5 of the South Asia Union Summit led by women. In this session, titled The Burden of Tradition, Gender Equality and Social Justice in South Asia, as you may know, and you're aware, South Asian traditions are very important and they're everything. But not all traditions might come across as humane, and some are divisive. I will introduce myself, and then I'll start by introducing the panelists. My name is Lina Shabib. I'm originally from Lebanon, and now I am currently living in Berlin, Germany. I myself have my own stories as a woman who held traditions, and having married to different cultures, I am also challenging the traditional baggage that sometimes I carry subconsciously. So today our panelists will discuss further on why we need to redefine tradition and come up with more humane ones that ensure equality and justice. So it is my honor to introduce our first panelist, Sabin Muzaffar. She is a feminist publisher and editor of Ananke magazine, who's joining us from UAE. She started the digital magazine and platform with the mission to empower women through education and awareness. She is a UN Women's Empower Women mentor and Sherry Blair Foundation mentor, and has been a journalist for the past 15 years. Welcome. Our second panelist, Mandy Sanghera. She's an award-winning philanthropist and human rights activist who's joining us from the UK. She started her human rights journey in 1990 when she rescued her friend with a disability from a forced marriage, and she continues to help other people who find themselves in a similar situation. She also addressed several issues such as female genital mutilation and marital rape, and currently serves as an ambassador and advisor for several charities. Welcome, Mandy.
Thank you.
Our third panelist is Dr. Sonora Jha. She's a journalism professor and author of How to Raise a Feminist Son, and she's joining us from the US. Her books follows her personal journey and her personal struggles and triumphs as a single mother and an immigrant raising an American feminist son. She holds a PhD in political communication, and she's also the co-editor of New Feminism in South Asia. She highlights a unique perspective in the Me Too movement as she compares the US and the South Asian countries and how parents can shield their children from the influence of patriarchal attitudes. Welcome. And we have Manjula Pradeep, founder of the WAVE Foundation and national convener of the National Council of Women Leaders in India. She's a human rights activist and lawyer, and she is the former executive director of Nafsarjan Trust, whom she joined at the age of 21 as their first female employee, and later became the executive director. And it is one of the largest Dalit rights organizations in India, addressing the issues of caste discrimination and gender-based discrimination. Welcome. And last but not least, we have our wonderful moderator, Sarita Bartaula, who's also joining us from the USA. And she is a researcher and the founding member of South Asia Peace Action Network. Sarita, I hand the mic over to you to lead this beautiful panel and discussion.
Thank you, Lena. You gave a perfect introduction to our panel. Before I invite our very inspiring speakers, I want to say a few words relating to the discussion title. Looking over the history and the religious values of South Asia, women are considered as goddess, equal to man, and sometimes even more powerful than man. However, practically, women in the region have been the victim of culture and tradition. And this culture and tradition are set as per the convenience of the people. Whether starting from the sati pratha in the past or currently practiced chaupadi pratha, honor-based system, caste-based system, forced marriage, child marriage, genital mutilation, and many other cultural practices create a ground for abuse and trauma. Even though women are more educated and more empowered than the past, women who ask for their rights are attacked and tagged as uncultured, family breaker, society spoiler, and many others. They are even outcasted from the society and the family. These traditions were made by people centuries ago, and it should not be forced on the people if it hurts people. We should create new tradition considering a new way of life that would lead to personal and social prosperity. With this, I would like to start with a kick-off question. Let me start with Savin. Savin, you have 4 to 5 minutes. As mentioned, South Asians love their culture and values, which are deep-rooted in our daily activities since the day we are born. How can we challenge old myths and think about new ones? Over to you, Savin.
Thank you, Sarita, for that question. I think the answer I came to is very simple, but it made me kind of dig deep within, and what it made me, or it rather makes me realize, is part of our culture, certainly not values, revolve around reinforcing old myths. I remember an essay we studied back in high school by Sir Syed Ahmad Khan, where he, and I think this was over a century ago, or even maybe more, spoke about unshackling ourselves from old myths and traditions that leave no space for growth, no space for learning. So there's no room to hear everyone out. So the answer to your question, I would say, is let's begin with ourselves. There's so many myths and traditions, and we as woke people, woke generation, need to untangle ourselves consciously, rid ourselves from bias, conscious as well as unconscious ones, because let's admit, let's confess, we have unconscious biases. So it starts with us, and then we initiate that domino effect from us to our better halves or worse halves. Take a pick, our kids, our families. That's how I would start in a nutshell. Thank you.
Thank you, Savin. I agree. There are so many times consciously and unconsciously, even being aware, even being educated, even knowing the consequences, we are the one. And we also unconsciously practiced it. And following up with the same question, I would like to go to Manjula. We have been talking a lot about gender roles since the centuries. And today, how far has society come in addressing the equality and the challenge women are still facing? How traditions crawl when it comes to caste system in our countries? How does the social context influence our perception of caste, class, and gender? Over to you, Manjula.
Thank you, Sarita. I think we are representing South Asia, and South Asia is a very diverse and society which is where the structural inequality is based not only patriarchy but also based on caste system. And we also have to understand that how the gender roles have been specified when we are talking about women in India or in South Asia, and how it impacts our lives, because ultimately the patriarchy and caste, when they are imbibed together, it really affects the rights of the women in South Asia. I represent India, which is the largest democracy which it boasts about, but we must see where are women in India in the context of caste and class and gender. I think the intersectionality framework needs to be addressed when we are talking about South Asian context, because caste impacts the lives of the women who are from the so-called untouchable communities or from the Dalit communities. And as you were mentioning about the various forms of practices which we have, we still have one more practice which hardly people speak about, is the Devdasi practice, which is forced temple prostitution, which is imposed on Dalit women when they are attaining their puberty, and it is still prevalent in the southern part of India. It is a shocking reality which I want to lay forward. I would say that how do we justify what is happening in our countries? I think what the figures which we come up when you talk about domestic violence, we talk about caste-based atrocities, when you're talking about caste-based gender violence, our women are suffering a lot. I don't see that kind of spaces which are there where they can redress themselves. India is a country which boasts about so much of development. Where is the social development indicators when we're talking about women? We still have a lower gender ratio in India. I think that is something we need to discuss about. We still have to see where are women in terms of employment opportunities, where are women in terms of literacy rates, and we also have to see how do women's lives are concerned when you talk about the economy of the country. We in South Asia, we have uh, Dalit women, we have Muslim women, we have tribal women who are also called indigenous women. Where are they? Where is their what is their position in the Indian society or in the South Asian society? We still have women who are wives and sisters of bonded laborers, and how they are sexually exploited, they are abused by the landlords. We still have women who are being punished for raising their voices, not only in the family but in the community and in the society. We still have practices like so called of, we believe that okay, the sati pratha is over, but we still have those kind of practices where the women, they can't come and redress themselves and speak about what's happening to their lives. I have worked last for 30 years, and I would say that we still have to do so much. And I think Indian society need to change its mindset. That is something which is affecting the rights of women in the context of India. And I would say it's similar in Bangladesh, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, or Nepal. I have traveled in all of these countries. I've met women from these countries, specifically Dalit women, and I would say that they live a very difficult life. I just want to raise one other issue, which is again, which is part of patriarchy and caste system, is inhuman form of cleaning of human excrement. I think that is something needs to be addressed. And it's not only in India, it's in Nepal, it is in Pakistan and Bangladesh. Our women from the lowest caste, they are forced to do the most filthy and dirtiest work in the world. And that is cleaning human excrement with bare hands. Can you believe what kind of feeling they go through when they do this dirty work every day? Nobody listens to them. There is no voice for them. And there are very few people or organizations or civil society who really address these issues. We do have women from the Muslim communities, and I come from Gujarat. And you know that in 2002, what happened in India? We had communal genocide in Gujarat. It impacted the lives of the Muslim women, and how their entire outlook towards the society changed. The fear they go through, the pain they go through, nobody thinks about them. We have so many single women. We have so many women who can't even live with dignity and self-respect. I think it is hard time. We have to see what's the role of women in our South Asian economy, and where do we address the issue of discrimination, violence, and also untouchability. Women from the Dalit communities, they face various forms of untouchability which is imposed on them just because they are born as untouchables. And the kind of pain they go through, some of us know about what it happens when you are born as an untouchable. How do you live with a dignity and self-respect when you're not allowed in your own family to get educated, to get empowered? I think this is something we need to discuss about. We need to talk about that. When you talk about gender role, I think it has to be equal for everybody. You can't just allow a society where the men, they control the lives of women. I think this is something we need to discuss. And I think women can play a very important role because they know what the pain is. Majority of the women in our South Asian society are affected by pain, trauma. They need healing. And I think that's where I think our own South Asian society need to work upon, frame policies, frame strategies, so that we can have an egalitarian society in South Asia. Thank you.
Thank you, Manjula. Very, very powerful message. I echo with you that South Asia is very diverse region, and even like a country in South Asia are diverse in itself, and we don't have a universal solution for gender equality. So we need to look into very specific caste, class, and geography, and address the issues accordingly. From here, I would like to move to Mandy. Now we have talked. We have talked about the issues in South Asia by previous speaker. The nation around South Asia have intact good laws and policies regarding gender discrimination. They have signed they have signed a lot of national and international treaties as well. There are also a number of profit and non-profit organizations that are working to address gender discrimination. Despite this substantial financial and human resource invested, women still faces discrimination in the homes, society, and the workplace in the name of culture and social values. Is it possible to create safe South Asia for women? What is the way out? Can we escape from the cultural trap?
Okay.
Over to you, Mandy.
Thank you so much. First of all, Manjula, I need to give you an applause because I think that what you have just said is so powerful and it resonates with me. I am not a Dalit woman, but I have always been an ally of Dalit women, and I have given my voice to women who belong to Dalit communities. And for me, it is so sad in the 21st century that we are still fighting for equality as we are. And the thing that brings that back to me is around how society and young people are still being socially conditioned and being educated by their community and their elders. Because actually, when we think about using terms like the untouchables, and people are being treated differently just because the caste that they're born into, and older women who become widow are branded witches, and people in certain parts of India are hunting down women and killing them. These things have to end, and we need to educate societies, and we need women in positions of power to become allies for other people. You don't need to be an ally, a Dalit woman, to become an ally. And I think that when we come together, we stand up and we raise our voices. We have seen crimes against not just the Dalit community, but other minorities as well, not just in India, but in other countries like Pakistan and Sri Lanka and other countries. And what I would say is that when people want a space in the world stage, they want to be a part of the UN circle, they want to be a member of the Commonwealth, and they want to do that, then you need to actually think about the values that you hold. Currently, I've just evacuated over 80 people from Afghanistan from the recent crisis. Prior to that, I was evacuating and helping interpreters to relocate to the UK and other countries. And what I have seen in the recent days and weeks is really shocking. And we have seen how the Taliban are taking people back decades. All the progress that we have made, we have seen women suffering now in the global south. And we need to actually start campaigning. We need women in positions of power. We need women to be given seats at the table. And we need to make sure that we leave no one behind, that when we talk about equality, that actually it applies to every citizen. I have had doubt with ministers in Asia who have called me out on certain things to say to me, why are you standing up for Dalits? You're being anti-national, you're being this, you're not being patriot to India. And I said, you know what? When I stood up for Jyoti Singh, when she was raped, I was anti-national. When I stand up for Dalit women, I'm anti-national. When I stand up for farmers, women, or whatever I stand up for, does not make me anti-national. I'm a humanitarian, and I will stand up for what is right. And I think that we have positions of power, and we have to lend our power. We have to use our voice to make the difference that we want to see. Listening to Manjula, it is really shocking that people still think it's okay for people from lower caste to be doing the work that we don't want to do ourselves. Everyone has a right to an education. Everyone has a right to be treated with respect and dignity. And we need to actually embed those values. We need to change the mindsets of the community in Asia, whether you belong to the Brahmin caste, the Jat caste in the Sikh community, or whatever else, and think that actually, we don't want to interact with the lower caste because, we can't marry into the lower caste. We really need to come back and educate. And one of the other things that I will say is that we need to look at the role that women play. A lot of the abuses that happen to women, when you watch your Bollywood movies and your so-called dramas on, certain channels, it always seems to be the woman who is actually abusing the other woman and think it's okay. So I think there's a lot of work that still needs to be done. But I do think that we need people's voices to be heard. And I think that it's time that we all lend our privilege and bring people up behind us. If we want equality, we got to make sure that we have everyone represented at that table. And we need to look at the LGBTQI community as well. And we need to look at people like the Kusras and everyone else, the trans community, who have been treated horrendously as well. And we need to look at all of those issues, because I can tell you now, there is nothing honorable about abuse in the name of honor and culture. We need to start looking at the way that we treat women, and we need to educate women. We need to empower them, make sure they have a seat at the table and their voice matters. We need to get women back into leadership and make sure that they are represented in politics as well, at every single level across the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Mandy. Thank you for bringing the influence of media and daily soap in our society. I can't agree more with you that it hurts that in 21st century we are still fighting for the equality. I also want to highlight a statement you just mentioned that we need to make sure we leave no one behind.
Yeah.
With this statement, I want to go to Sonora Jha. Thank you very much for your book. It's we know we need to empower, educate, involve women. We want to see women in the leadership. At the same time, there is a very important vacuum their book fulfill is how to involve the man in this campaign we are moving towards. So despite our progress, women are often still the one raising the children, and they subconsciously influence how children interact with the society. In this context, we still have sons and the children who believe cooking and cleaning are gender roles, not basic life skill. How can we raise a feminist son? Over to you, Sonora.
Thank you, Sarita. And I'm just so honored to be on this panel with, with these women who've really laid out the breadth and the depth of all the work that needs to be done, especially Manjula, thank you for talking about intersectionality, because I think when we talk about tradition, the first tradition that we have to look at is this notion of hierarchy, right? That we tend to think that certain people deserve respect just from their status in society or their status within the family. So until we look at that at a very basic and individual state, even, we probably won't get out of that mindset of like this respect being given to someone even though they've done very little to earn it. It's from just their status of their birth, whether it's Brahmins, Brahmin men, men in general, or an elder brother, for instance. So these are the kinds of things. I mean, I write about my personal experiences with these as a woman born in a Brahmin family, looking at some of the violence and the kind of respect that I was supposed to give to my older brother when he was not being called out for his violence. And so in order to raise a feminist son, to get to your question, I think we first need to really take a really good, strong look at what tradition means and upend that and say, and sort of like kick that out the window, because we're not going to be able to raise feminist sons or raise decent human beings if we don't address how we have undermined women within the family structure by even traditions like Raksha Bandhan, for instance. I really want to go after that tradition. I don't know why I was tying a string around my brother's wrist, asking for his protection when he was the one who was being violent toward me, right? And so a lot of people, when I talk about this, say, oh, we cannot go after these traditions. There's beauty in these traditions. And I feel like, sure, if you are really speaking to the beauty and the love behind the tradition, let's make it a universal one, but there's this sense of like, so, and also when a woman asks for protection, what are we really asking for? We are only worthy of protection if we are being the good girl or the good wife or the good mother. If we start to break certain rules in order to, and we're breaking the rules in order to claim the humanity that is actually supposed to be given to everyone else, but is not, and we step out of our certain prescribed roles to claim that, we are cast aside, and we are, as you mentioned earlier, we are seen as the destroyers of tradition, destroyers of the family and society, etc. Right? So coming back to raising a feminist son, the first thing is to examine all of this and to live a feminist life, make feminist choices. And I mean this for not just for women, I mean this across all genders, that we really, really need to see how feminism is compassionate toward all genders and is trying to achieve gender equality. And to say, so teach your son, for instance, one of the big things that I say is we have to teach our boys and our men to learn to apologize sincerely and to make amends. Because one of the things I learned about myself was I didn't expect consequences, whether it's in the Me Too movement or whether it is, at home, that I don't expect men to have consequences. And if we don't expect consequences, then we don't expect consequences for Brahmin men and Brahmin supremacy. We don't expect it for white male supremacy here in America. We don't And so there are little things like that, a feminist value system that we need to bring into the home, and that comes by examining our own men in our homes, our own complicity as women, etc. We can talk more about it later.
Thank you, Sonora. Very. This point are very. It's close to the heart because we experience it every day. I agree with you that man in our house should be trained to apologize, trained to respect women, trained to have empathy, and the changes start from home. Following up with this question, like in 21st century, our daughters are taught to be modern, self-confident, independent, self-reliant. However, the day they become the daughter-in-law, they're expected to be housewives, take care of their husband, in-laws, and the children, and still contributing to the household and the finance. Do you think the society today is hypocritical when it comes to gender equality? Are women responsible to the hypocrisy? I want to go back to Mandy with this question.
Thank you. What a great question. You know what? I mean, in England, where I am, and when we think about the West, before the pandemic, women were paid 24% less than men for the same job. So we have been fighting inequality across the globe for women to be treated equally. The World Economic Forum has done some research and said we've gone back a further 36 years. And now we've been told to get gender equality is going to take 257 years. So none of us are going to be around to see that. And then when we think about our culture, when we think about being a South Asian woman, it comes back to being conditioned. We've been told to be a certain way. So when I think about myself being, I'm now in my 50s. And when I was in my 20s, when I got a house and I did things, people were like, oh my God, what are you doing? You should be. And they had this little list of things that they expected you to be. They had a tick list that they think that you have to be. Married, you have to have children, you have to do this, this, this. Now, my life hasn't gone that way because of health and other things. And, I'm living an amazing life of service and abundance. And I live my life the way that I want to do that. But I also know that the stigma that I had coming up, where people would say to me, oh, but she needs to be like this. Why is she like this? Why is she independent? Or they didn't want you to speak to their daughters or their daughter-in-laws because they were worried that you were going to almost brainwash women. People can think for themselves. So I think that we need to come back to educating people. And actually what we need to realize is that actually we now live in a time in the world where we can't live on one person's salary. And actually, in the UK, men have to share the chores. They have to raise the children with the partners because we work in such different ways. The pandemic has now leveled that playing field somewhat because people have been juggling so many balls in the air that actually they had to do that reset. So I do think that there is still things that need to be done in our community specifically, that we need to educate older women who are my age group, who are now the new mother-in-laws. If you were treated badly and you knew what that was like, why are you now redoing that to somebody else? You really need to change and grow up and create feminist sons who respect equality. They want their sisters to have rights. They want their wife to have a life free of violence and fear. They want their daughters to be able to have choices and have the right to choose who they want to marry and what they want to do. So I think, I love the fact that, Sarita's got this, and we've got talking about raising feminist sons. It is so important. But one of the things that I would also like to just say before I go is that we need to rip up this rule book. We need to rip up this checklist. We need to rewrite our own checklist, and we need to be the change that we want to see in the world.
Thank you, Mandy. This is a very powerful statement. Why are you redoing it? I always keep saying that my mother or the mother of my generation changed for their daughter 25 to 30 years back. And when they come to have their daughter-in-law, now they are all of a sudden, they have become the old school. So that is very important. Powerful is like, isn't that hypocritic? Are they really old school? Is there the term called old school nowadays? Should we just rename it saying good behavior and other behavior are criminal behavior for sure? Or maybe any other right positive term, I'm not sure, because I just feel like this would just be like a criminal behavior. And I agree, a man can be a feminist and a woman can be promoting the gender disparity. With this statement, I would like to go to Sabine again. As we all know, we love our culture and tradition, and we are practicing it. That's our identity. And it's the women in the family who pass the culture and tradition from one generation to another generation. Can we practice the culture and tradition and achieve the gender equality at the same time? If so, then how? What do you think? Over to you, Sabine.
Thank you, Sarita. So the short answer is yes. And the long answer, it starts from, South Asia, like any other regions, it has breathtaking richness as far as our culture and traditions are concerned. But on the flip side, it's our deeply entrenched belief systems, rising perhaps from our agrarian feudalistic ancestry, that plays a role. I don't know. So I think we need to very conscious. We need to be very conscious about our role as individuals and members of society. And here, I would definitely say that I'm going to say something which might be perhaps controversial for some and food for thought for many. But I think to achieve gender equality, we need to work and present solutions organically. Yes, we can get inspiration from what is happening in other regions of the world and talk about gender equality. But alongside that, we need to walk the talk. We need to find solutions that are organic. They emerge from the land. Only something that is either born or risen from the land, I think only that can be sustainable, because then you'll have ownership as well. And for these ideals, they will have roots from deep within. And that is not to say that we need to tweak these ideals to achieve an end, but to create something which is tangible, which through intersectionality and social justice and empathy. Because culture is something that we ourselves as a society and as families, we create it, and it needs to evolve in order to I think it needs to evolve in order to survive and thrive. And the ticket for its survival is in fact through a gender lens, because let's face it, look at what patriarchal hegemony has resulted in. So it's a matter of evolution, it's a matter of humankind survival, that we practice culture with positive inclusive traditions and celebrate gender equality at the same time. I hope that answers your question.
It definitely does. Thank you so much. I agree with all the statement we mentioned that women need to educate it and empower. Like throughout the discussion, I have been thinking, should education and empowerment enough? Are educated and empowered women have stopped promoting the violence, promoting the disparity in the society? So with this, I would like to go back to Sonora again with, we often hear the statement, gender inequality has been reduced, women are empowered and provided with the freedom. That's what data shows, that we are more educated, more in leadership, more they have been involved in economic and financial activities. They have been traveling around the globe. Do you agree with this statement? If not, why? If yes, is that what we have achieved is enough? Over to you, Sonora.
Yeah, I'll apologize in advance because my dog is barking his head off because he sees something outside. So I hope you can hear me over his barking. I see that we have to raise a feminist dog. But I would definitely say, we have empowered. So when we talk about women's empowerment, we have, for a few generations in my own family, I have seen very powerful women, very empowered women, and a whole lot of policies and laws that do work toward empowering women. What we haven't done is tell men to get out of our way. And this is a very, very plain way of putting it. But I think unless men are told or taught to get out of our way, to pass the mic, to share the space, to share power, to understand that they can be followers as much as they have to be leaders. All of these things, and I don't mean just respect women, because they can respect the Devi concept, right? That they respect the goddesses, they respect the Ma and the mother and everything, but they don't respect women who might be stepping outside and claiming their space in society. They may not respect women who are very confident about their sexuality. They may not respect people of other genders, right? So we don't just talk about respect, because that can be seen and used in different ways, and that can be used to police women, because what is a respectable woman? But I think unless we tell men to get out of the way, and we really focus on what are the spaces, what are the ways in which in which we are honoring male supremacy, where are we still believing that this is a man's job, or what are we not examining within our homes? What are we really every single day questioning Brahmin patriarchy in India? Are we questioning Islamophobia in India? Are we questioning all of these things? If we, and we have to do it at an individual basis, and then take it to the structural and policy basis. Unless we do that, unless we go after male supremacy, and I'm not saying, oh, I'm a man hater, go after men. I'm talking about the structures that keep this kind of male supremacy in place. Unless we go after those, no amount of empowering of women is really going to create that kind of quantum leap that we need now, because we've been empowering women for a long time. What we haven't done is disempower or decenter. I mean, everyone should be powerful, but decentering someone is really important, so that we're all on an even playing field. Someone is not more central than others.
Thank you so much. That's very powerful statement again. We are just coming up with one over other powerful statement. I agree with the statement that if our daughters and sisters are not safe at home, how can we expect the society and all the family to protect them? With this, the very powerful statement we hear around South Asia, I believe, mostly in Nepal for sure, is the family matters should stay inside the family. In this context, it's not only like daughter-in-law sometimes are not even allowed to talk to their own mother and brother in their like maternal side of the family. So it's one of the most famous statements in South Asia. This statement has prevented women from talking about domestic violence and abuse with their friends and the family. Women stay quiet until they could handle it, leading to increase in mental and societal case in recent years. The case of mental health and societal among women have soared during the time of COVID 2019. What can we do to empower women to speak against violence and abuse? How can we make safe environment where women can share their problem and issues with their other sisters before it's too late? Over to you, Manjula, with this question.
Thank you, Sarita. I think you have raised a very pertinent question, and what you laid down about South Asia needs to be discussed about. I think the first thing is, okay, domestic violence is not a family matter. It's a crime. It's an offense. And it's not only domestic violence within our own families. I think there's a big number of incest in the family sphere. And most of the times, the children are not able to speak out about incest, and that's sexual abuse by a known person. Um, Domestic violence itself is seen as something which is part of the culture, because people believe that because women don't have the equal rights, despite it's given in the Indian constitution or in the South Asian context. In our constitution we are treated as equals, but when we come in our own families, and it's not only the married women who face domestic violence, it's also those young women who are not married, they also face domestic violence. And the domestic violence itself lays around the fact that we are not treated as equal. So where do we start when we talk about addressing the issue of inequality? And it starts from home, as you raised that question. And how do we raise that question within our own families or in our own communities? And I think community itself also plays a very important role, because in India we have khap panchayats also, which are caste councils, and also the religious councils. So where do we start with? I think in our own families, I think the most important aspect is you have to treat your daughters as equal, and there the gender equality comes up. You just don't so there are people who talk big things about in the society when they are given spaces to speak, but in their own families they have to look within. What are they doing with their daughters, with their sisters, with their mothers, with their wives? I think these are the questions which one needs to discuss with their own families. Our families don't have those kind of spaces, unfortunately. Our families don't discuss about issues of violence and discrimination, because women are tend to be seen as carrying the burden of not only taking care of the child which she has given birth to, but also taking care of the entire family with her mouth shut. I work with several women, thousands of women in the country, in India, and I must tell you that what I could do is I am trying to break up the silence. I think we need to make our women understand that they should not suffer in silence. And I think this is what I realized when I was traveling in the rural areas of Gujarat in 1992. And I realized that where are women? They are in the kitchen, washing clothes, taking care of children, and men hold all the powerful positions. And I think that is something which needs to change. Women are as equal as men, and women have to realize that. Our women who are literate, educated, but they don't even understand when somebody violates their rights in their own family. And I've seen it personally. I've seen women who go through so much of pain and trauma, who face domestic violence and sexual abuse, and they don't want to raise the voice. And as you said, that majority of them, when they don't come out of their so-called cupboard of fear, they tend to take a drastic step where they take their lives. I don't want to say they commit suicide, but they take their lives. And this happens because they don't get any support. I did a study of unnatural deaths of women in Gujarat, and specifically Dalit women, and I must say that what kind of ways women commit suicide is hanging, burning themselves. I think that's a major issue, major way of women committing suicide, consuming poison. And I was like shocked, or drowning themselves in a well or a pond. And I was shocked because I have tried to understand the problem. And I must say that what we know about our own South Asian society is tip of the iceberg. There's so much to peel out of that, that we will come to know that it's so difficult for us to realize that the pain and trauma which a woman goes through is hardly been addressed through a law, through a policy, or through a scheme. We need much more than that. We have human rights institutions in our own countries. Are they really functioning effectively? Is there a redressal mechanism? These are the questions which I am putting forward today. And I think this is what we need to question also. And personally, I train women leaders at the grassroots. I want women activists to become leaders so that they can help those who are surviving sexual violence or domestic violence, and they can help them to address it in a legal way, or in a way that they don't harm themselves. And I must say that mental health and mental well-being has been ignored. It's not been taken so seriously even by the human rights activists. So addressing a problem of violence doesn't mean that just taking that case and going for a legal intervention, but I think we need to handhold the person who's affected by violence. We have to ensure that that person gets emotional support, moral support, get healing. I think healing is so important for us women, our mothers, our sisters, our daughters, our friends, our colleagues. They don't get that opportunity, I must tell you, and it's hard time for them to really survive in a volatile environment. And when we talk about COVID, and it really impacted the mental health of women in the South Asian society. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
This is so insightful, and I think many of us can relate it. Either we have faced it ourselves or we have seen other facing it. I have seen in my past, like so many people in the village I grew up, they used to invest on their son education, but they did not invest in their daughter education. And even like in a Hindu culture, the marriage where daughter the kanyadan, and when after doing the kanyadan, the word of like the daughter will go in the doli and they will never return back to their maternal side of the family and have to leave their in-laws house in Arti is one of the statement which will never allow women to come back to their own home and talk about the problem they will go through. We passed the time, I guess. Do we have a time for one more question or no?
I would just like to just make one comment before we go, and I would like to just say that we need to unpick the word honor, visit, whatever you may call it, because we always associate it to women. And we need to unpick that and look at that, because actually the points that Manjula has just made, women, self-harming, killing themselves, why are they doing that? It's because the families are telling them, community is telling them, the shame, the honor, you hold that. And the point that you've just made around that you go from a doldi and your arti leaves that home. So you know what, there's a lot of work to be done. And I think that we really need to bring that home. And I think we unpick that word. And that would be my final thought.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sarita,
Thank
do
you.
you want any last comments?
Yeah, I just want to say, one of the things that all of us have raised is this culture of shame and silence in South Asian families, and especially for women. And as Mandy said, it's reserved because women are supposed to be honorable. I think we really need to tell our own stories. So when we say we're helping other women, we need to be careful, because the thing is, there's the culture of shame and silence usually also points at, oh, that woman needs help, because somehow we stigmatize this thing of, oh, she's not empowered, we need to help someone. And the bichari concept, when I hate that word, because it's almost like, oh, we're trying to uplift some women that are, but it's all of us, we've all gone through certain things. And Mandy shared the checklist, for instance, right? A lot of us have had to rebel and push past certain things. And if I took the risk of talking about my own family in my book, and it was very hard. I had to unlearn some of the tradition within myself, that I've carried this patriarchy within myself of the silence. And if we don't talk about these, we are not able to tell younger women, younger men, boys, that look, we can live differently, that there's joy, there's so much joy in being a woman and taking risks and getting out there in the world and making your own life, untrodden path. Right? There's so much joy and so much pride that you can have in all of that. Unless we start talking about that rather than pathologizing the state of womanhood, we won't encourage that kind of radical, new kind of lifestyle that we need to approach.
And I just think the final thing I would like to say as well is around, we have talked about so many important things today, and, and it's been really an eye-opener for me personally, again, living in the West. And actually, when we look at the world's biggest democracy, that women are still fighting for equality. And when we talk about abuse at home, and even in the UK and everywhere around the world, being abused by a stranger is quite rare in the UK. But however, abuse happens within the home. And I think the points that Manjula made, but we then don't talk about it, because if a daughter was abused by an uncle or by a sibling or somebody else, they will say, well, if you tell somebody, nobody will marry you. And if you are a victim of sexual violence for marital rape, we're saying, well, actually, you know what, that's your husband. He has that right. We need to really break away from the comments that we're doing. These are contributing factors to women's mental health and well-being. The global pandemic has had shadow pandemics of domestic violence, of child abuse and mental health. And I think that we need to look at this. And I think it's so important that when we think about a reset, that we listen to women like yourselves, that we listen to survivors and say to them, you have done nothing wrong. We need to call out the abusers and the perpetrators, because actually this has to end. And that would be something that I just think it was really powerful that I've heard today.
Thank you, everyone. Sabine, did you want to say one more thing?
Yeah, just one more thing. And I completely resonate with each and every one of you, Mandy, Sonora, Manjula. And, going back to the concept of honor that you say, Mandy, needs to change. I think we all agree. And it should start by not giving, but, it should start with justice, social justice. And it should start from there, and it should move forward toward, empowerment. Thank you.
Thank you, Sabine. Thank you, Sarita, for moderating the session. Thank you, dear panelists, for bringing this powerful discussion into different dynamics and giving a voice to challenging what no longer serves us. And I hope more of us who are watching or who later see this to join their voices with this mission as well. And based on that discussion, please do also watch the next talk, which is about feminine intelligence and how to embody it as women and as leaders. So thank you again, and we hope to see you in the next talk. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you.